Hi, everyone. So this is going to be the first of the multiple application reflection modules, and it's just an opportunity for you to connect the dots between certain topics and course concepts with clinical or your nursing practice, but also just kind of personal, academic, and professional. So this first one, we're going to look at week 1 concepts and apply them to the topic of nutrition. So in terms of the assignment you're submitting for this week for reflection application, this is part 1. So you don't need to share with us your answers to these questions, but what we want you to share is how your answers to these questions influence your nursing practice. So what does food mean to you? How did this come to be? Um, Lots of ways to answer this. There's no right or wrong. I just, ask that you be as genuine and thoughtful in it. What factors influence what you eat, when you eat, where you eat, how and how much you eat, and with whom. I want us to get to the nuances of food and eating and nutrition and what this all means. This could be related to time of the year, maybe celebrations, whether they're religious or secular. This could be in terms of maybe stress level or time of day, where you're living, if you're living with someone, if you're learning how to cook, if you are expected to cook, if you have, even the resources to, including time, to meal plan. Do you eat with, what types of utensils, or do you eat with your hands? How does that change? And getting to the nuances of eating and nutrition and food. So getting to the relationship between yourself and food, which can help us connect to relationships between your clients, patients, community, and food. What factors shape if and how you prepare and dispose of food? And then what have been your experiences with hunger and access to food? Okay, so again, you don't need to necessarily share all your answers to this, but just share with us how you see your answers to these connecting to your nursing practice. So I wanted to point out a key piece of legislation related to our food ecosystem. So we have what's called the Farm Bill, and it's considered an omnibus bill because it covers multiple topics and is renewed every 5 years. So you can take a look here at just some of the dimensions of food and farming that are involved, and you can see just how much of different aspects of agriculture and food and nutrition are impacted. I wanted to highlight this one article that was actually just published very recently in the Journal of Health Affairs, which is a great one when it comes to healthcare and policy. And it talks about how the loss of SNAP, Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program, is associated with food insecurity and poor health, particularly in working families with young children. And then we also see here there are resources in terms of the California Food Policy Advocates Organization, and they have updates in terms of related pieces of legislation or bills. And also district by district, we can see, by that I mean California districts, different fact sheets in terms of nutrition and utilization of CalFresh. So lots of resources available. Okay, so this comes from an Oxfam report. So taking a look at these, which brands do you recognize? Where do you recognize them from? And maybe what are the relationships between them? Now, if we zoom out, again, part of an eco-social, as well as even, a geopolitical standpoint, is that economic relationships are fundamentally important when it comes to opportunities for health. And so if we zoom out, all these different subsidiaries are not really as independent as we think. We can tie all of these to these, what we call the Big 10 companies. And if we were to get a little bit more in depth, we could also see relationships between tobacco companies, fossil fuel industries, and these companies. So the next couple slides are just a prompt for us to really look at food in terms of relationship between land, gender, and occupation and labor. So land, women, and farmers in particular. So looking at food and health and human rights. So these are some of the indicators. So take a look at this on the next slide. We also see there are, and they continue to exist, these long struggles connecting labor rights, and the human rights and life opportunities and wellness of folks who are planting, harvesting the produce that we eat, and really connecting that more broadly to legislation and different types of policies. So we see Cesar Chavez, Kennedy, we see Larry Itliong, we see Coretta Scott King in terms of, with Cesar Chavez in terms of the boycott of lettuce. These are maybe, if you don't identify yourself or a parent or grandparent or other caregiver in your family as being a farm worker or a migrant farm worker, then this is something that is important for us to bring into our lens in terms of the relationship between how we feed each other and are fed and labor protections. So we see here other indicators in terms of health and human rights include labor conditions, climate, transparency, and use of water, and how different industries use water and impact the water supply of communities and industries around them. So we may not necessarily feel a deep connection to farm workers. Maybe some of us do, but I want us to be very clear that workers' rights that exist today exist in large part because of these struggles that came before us. And looking globally, and we'll see in this class, globalization is more of a neutral term, whereas really, if we look more broadly, we can see imperialism and colonialism in different forms. And so when it comes to land deals, we could even consider them land grabs. Where are land deals or land grabs occurring and by whom? And we can also connect this to climate change. So just take a couple minutes, go to behindthebrands.org, and you'll find this image here on the left. And I encourage you to go to select a brand and select any one of those. You can select one that's maybe a product that you love, that's been a staple in your diet, or maybe one that you've never heard of, and take a look at what information is available. Part of this is really that connection between knowledge and learning and changes in behavior and action. Okay, I mean, ultimately, that's the purpose of learning, whether it's in a university setting or elementary school setting or not. But, what do we do with the awareness that we have? How might that change our shopping behaviors? So the one I chose was Fanta. One of my good friends is obsessed with Fanta, the orange one. And so I was like, okay, I'll choose Fanta. So I wanted to show you here what one looks like. And so you see what the scores mean. You have the legend up top. And you have the different indicators. So land, women, farmers, workers, climate, transparency, and water. And part of this is us really, whether it's looking at the food we buy personally, the food that we have, that we see in our different healthcare settings, the food and beverage that we recommend. I want us to see that consumers have a great deal of power, and you vote by what you purchase and where you purchase. So if depending on which indicators really stand out to you as important, you might consider taking a look at some of the products that you're using regularly and consider action based on that, on the report card. Okay, so this is a brief activity. You can do it now or in the future, but I really encourage you to seek out the information, information that can really promote health and wellness, not just, for workers, that's enough, but also for us as communities. It's great to demand transparency. Okay, so this one question: within the past 12 months, have you ever been worried about food running out before you got money to buy more? That's a really great question if you don't already see it regularly as a way to screen for food insecurity. And this is just some background information about something that occurred in 2018 about soda taxes in California. Okay, so this is more reflection. I really encourage you to consider this, really taking stock of your education so far, and also in terms of the teaching, the education you have shapes the teaching you will do yourselves. So take a look at this. All right, so talked about this in class, but I wanted to come back to this in terms of the health inequities framework and take a look again more closely from downstream to upstream in terms of indicators, but also avenues for action and initiatives on the bottom. All right, so part one of the application or reflection for this week was, how your responses to those questions on the earlier slide influence your nursing practice. Part two is to open up the blank Bar-High framework. The link is included in this folder on Blackboard. And based on this module, based on the readings in this folder, fill in that blank worksheet in regards to nutrition and food ecosystems. Okay, and then write just, one paragraph max. It can literally be 3-4 sentences. Write a brief description of how you might promote nutrition given this broad spectrum of influences when it comes to nutrition.